What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of What's Your Issue, the People's Weekly Comic Book Reviews podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Agascles Stamus, and here with me, as always, is the stalwart, Stephen Laura. How you doing, Stephen?
Doing great.
Good. So we are recording with a bit of a delay this week due to the Christmas holiday. And if you haven't joined the show before, and for some reason you're joining here at the end of the year, what we do for about an hour or a little bit more every week is we normally run down about 6 of the comics from our pulls from the preceding week. So tonight we're going over the comics that shipped the shipping date of 19 December 2018. So we go over 6 of those in pretty deep detail. This is a spoilery reviews show. We don't hold back. We're not going to lay off of going into certain things in the issue. Every once in a while, if something is very particular about resetting a new status quo, we might lay off of that, but very frequently we have to get into that in order to effectively talk about the book. So if you haven't read your comics for some reason, go back and do that and then come back and listen to the show. Now, most of you are probably already digging into the cornucopia of, I think, a total of like 4 comics that shipped this week, since today is New Comic Book Day. So you probably have plenty of time to still reminisce about the comics that shipped last week. So we're going to go over 6 of those. We will then declare the best thing that each of us read last week, cover our honorable mentions, and then again in a really lengthy segment this week, we will talk about the 3 comic books that will be in our pull list for this week that we will go over. Actually, the next show we're going to skip a week because this is such a light shipping week. And the next show that we record will be on the 7th of January. So that is pretty much the format. With that, we are going to go ahead and get into it. The first book in the reviews rundown is one that I am reviewing this week. It is cover number 4 from the weird Bendis imprint label over at DC.
It's Jinx World.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just having a bit of a time pulling up. So I read the preceding issue to this, and so this issue opens up. Creative team on this is Brian Michael Bendis and David Mack. They doing this thing where, because it's a comic book about comic book creators, they have additional creators come in to do the work of the comic book creators who are actually characters in the story. So this week, the guest additional creator is Michael Avon Emming. Letters by Carlos Mangual and colors by Zoo. So this week continues from where we left off last issue with Esad Sins, who is supposed to be Esad Ribic in real life. Continuing with the torture and interrogation scene between Esad and the main character Max. I had a bit of a problem with the one knock on this issue that I had was this opening sequence is fairly brutal, and it's brutal to a point that it kind of transcends that disbelief that or transcends that suspension of disbelief that you have in the comic. So it was so brutal that I was like, this guy is an untrained, intelligence operative thrown into this situation. The only thing that he is of note that he has a talent that he brings along with him is that he's a frequent international traveler. I'm going to these conventions. So if you didn't know the setup for this book is that Max Field, who is a comic book creator, is approached by the CIA and asked to become an operative because his cover of being a comic book creator with all the conventions that he goes to is an effective way for him to move around and remain covert. So the previous issue, he and Esad Sins had a deep conversation about the makeup of their characters. And it continues in this book with Esad trying to smack something out of him. Now, there's a bit of a jump here then where he is rescued. It's not really clear to me. I think Eastside just leaves him where he is, and then he is rescued by the other operatives. Through this book, we have some apparent feelings being developed between Max and his handler. I think her name is Juanita, who's actually modeled modeled on a model in real life. I forget the actress's name or the model's name. Then we flash back out to the convention floor where the next day Max and Eastside are just supposed to go about their business as if one of them hasn't just brutally tortured the other. And then in the next jump, we get Max going back to what I assume is New York and crashing at a friend of his pad. The both of them are working on doodling future chapters of books. And Max's friend is actually working on something that he believes is going to be a hit comic. There's lots of dancing around the topic at hand because Max's friend can tell that something has happened to him, and Max just plays it off as, I'm just jet lagged. So I thought this was a really good comic. And one of the things that it does well with the art is, I've kind of become a little weary of the trend that there is going on out in comic book art to use these kind of singular color palettes and not have a lot of different shades in colors. There was a time where you would do a few panels in black and white, or you would do a whole issue in black and white, and it was something special. I just feel like it's kind of becoming tropish and being overused in the industry. But I really like how David Mack goes back and forth between all these different styles. This is, did I say that this was looking like an Eisner winning series a few weeks ago? I thought maybe this was the book.
Yes.
I think so.
I don't remember.
But what's really good about this, if you think about the things that earn actors and actresses Emmys, one of the things that earns them at least a nod or a nomination for that is when they are in a show or in a movie where they play several different characters, because the challenge on them is greater because they have to keep going back and forth between these multiple personalities. David Mack is having to do that a lot here. He goes through different styles. He has this faux blue or noir blue almost color palette that he uses in the opening of the book. Then whenever Max is with Juanita, he has this kind of splotchy but very spring-like color palette in the background. In between that, he has kind of dream sequences when Max falls asleep, and so that looks different. And then he has these sequences when Max is kind of out in the public, which is a different style. So it's really interesting how he's going back and forth between all those different styles and putting a lot of different artistic approaches on display in the course of a single comic. Again, this story, like the setup to this story, is so great. It practically writes itself. I'm sure Ben is supposed to be having a ball writing it. So at the end of the day, I gave this issue an 8.0 out of a 10.0 scale. Steven, did you read this issue? Oh, we may have lost Steven. So I'm pretty sure Steven has been reading these because he was the one who turned me on to them initially. So hopefully he will make it back to talk about them as well. So I'm going to continue on talking about it now. I've got to be kind of like an octopus because I still have to get the social media out, but perhaps almost more importantly, what I need to do is I need to check in on the live stream to see if anybody has joined in on the chat. So we'll have that available shortly. The next book in the rundown I will also cover is Betty and Veronica #1 by Archie Comics. And again, this is another week where, unfortunately, I have also been upgrading a PC this week, so I'm a little discombobulated and not as well prepared with my notes. So this is Betty and Veronica #1, which details their relationship in their senior year. You start the comic off with them going over the exit side of their summer, and a lot of promises and pacts that they're making about how the year is going to go. And then you see them in the first few days of their senior year. The creative team on this story is by Jamie Lee Rotante, art by Sandra Lanz, and I guess that means penciling and inking. Letters by Jack Morelli and colors by Kelly Fitzpatrick. So the art in this book is sometimes gets a little hard to discuss, and particularly when it comes time to compare an Archie comic against others. There's a deliberate kind of nostalgia motif to it, and so you're never, except when they're doing kind of their weird Archie offshoots, things that are like not kind of classic traditional Archie. In general, you're not going to get like a Jim Lee or a Jim Cheung or any of these like or Francis Manapul or any of these like really highly detailed or even hyper stylized artists on Archie. It's deliberately done to kind of look like a general middle class America comic book, so to speak. That being said, there are some neat approaches on colors here by Fitzpatrick. She does do a good job of juxtaposing as many colors as she can. Veronica has the deep purple. Betty in a couple scenes has bright reds. So there's plenty of red between all of the redheads, orange colored hair kids, pink shirts, and things of that nature scattered throughout the comic. So that gives it a kind of bright eye poppy look, almost kind of like The Sims is what it makes me feel like sometimes. There are. So yeah, I mean the art is fine. Again, it's just it's never going to be in a style that really causes it to leap out at me in particular as something spectacular. But again, the main role of art in a comic in my mind is to not distract the reader and screw up the story. Storytelling, I will say, is perfectly fine throughout the comic. So the story in this, as I mentioned, is we open up with a scene with Betty and Veronica making promises back and forth to each other and kind of psycho-evaluating each other as to, why they are, how they are, and, how they felt about their years ending. Strangely enough, Betty, for some reason, was dating Reggie, at least at the beginning of the summer, and then the two of them broke up. There was a scene later in the comic where Reggie appears to convey that the reason he broke up with Betty was because he knew that she should be with Archie. So there's that. So it's kind of weird, the story arc that this traverses, because some of the pages are about them kind of just getting back together and seeing friends that they were out of touch with over the summer. But a lot of it is also kind of this telegraphing of how well Ronnie and Betty are going to actually stick to the promises that they made each other about how the senior year was supposed to go. It's a little interesting, and I'm kind of interested to see where the story goes. Again, I hope that what gets brought out is something, special and unique from a woman's perspective that I wouldn't have considered. I think Jamie Lee Rotante is a woman. Hey, Steven, how you doing?
I'm good.
Good.
The computer crashed.
Okay. All right. So Steven's going to be joining us from his phone, and that is A-okay. Yeah. I have gone on to Betty and Veronica #1, so actually I'm heading towards wrapping that up now. But one of the things that I'm worried about where it feels a little pedestrian is so these two young women, we open up with the camera on them talking about how they're going to stick together, and how it's going to be a very female first kind of agenda, so to speak. And then seemingly part of the story is like the moment that the two of them are away from each other, it all becomes about boys again. Betty gets separated from Veronica at a party near the end of the story, has too much. Well, she has something to drink, which for her, any amount to drink is too much. and rather than seek out Veronica, who's at the party that Betty is at because they came together, her instinct is to call for Archie. So Archie comes and picks her up. As Archie drops her off, she moves in for the kiss, but Archie kind of turns his head away. Good on you there, Archie. Veronica winds up driving home with Reggie. So, and the two of them kind of had a heartfelt talk about what was the deal behind the breakup between he and Betty. So, again, there's things that, because an Archie comic is what it is, feel kind of pedestrian and mundane. But it's up to the writers on these books. If you talk about Mark Waid's what will now go down in history, I think as a seminal classic run writing Archie, then it's up to the writer to do something that breaks their time on Archie out. So I'm suspecting that the curveball or twist that this road is going to throw at us is something different than we're kind of being painted on the surface. And so we'll just have to see what the next issue from Jamie Lee Rotante brings. Steven, I'm assuming you did not read Betty and Veronica #1.
Oh, I think it's Recover. Like, it's right.
Oh yeah, you would. Yes, we can go back and talk about your opinions on Cover really quick before we go on to talk about Spider-Geddon. Go ahead.
I gave it an 8.0. It was okay to me. It wasn't, the issue was kind of, I guess, not as strong as the last one, but I still enjoyed it. Yeah. It was pretty interesting to see Bendis in the issue. I was expecting that. Like, he inserted himself in there.
Yeah, so I am not familiar with him. Which one is he? Is he the guy whose couch Max crashes on?
Yeah, that is him. Because
Okay.
he has the same face. Like, I can tell it's him.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, and I kind of felt the same way. Just to go back to Betty and Veronica #1. So that book I rated a 7.0 out of 10, which is a solid score for me for a single issue comic. But yeah, back on Cover.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of where I landed. Like I preferred issue #3. Felt like a slightly stronger, but they went to different places scene wise. They went to more places in issue #3. This was kind of a slightly quieter issue, and again, the brutality of the opening scene just it's a risky creative choice, right? And in some ways, it can work really well, and in some ways, to me, it fell kind of flat because as he was taking all that punishment, I was like, I just don't like. First of all, a person taking that kind of punishment wouldn't be awake to talk about it. So that was a little off-putting.
I didn't even think about that. I just saw him beating him up. He did not come out. I think.
Yeah. It was just yes after like 18 panels, right? it's 18 panels of
and it's like what the time the girl picks him up. Like, did the girl see him get beat up?
No, she just saw him in the aftermath. So yeah, it was just a little. It was the equivalent of like an 80s like shock scene. It's like a scene out of Reservoir Dogs. Is kind of what it made me feel like, and I just felt it was a little. I felt it was a little over the top. So, but like I said, that's just a creative choice. But now we both read Spider-Geddon #5. So why don't you go ahead and start talking us through that, and then I'll jump in and give you my thoughts on it as well.
I'm gonna try to switch off my computer here because I already finished loading. I think I do it.
Nope.
Nah.
After.
Just notices. Yeah. Hello?
Yep, we got you. Go ahead.
Yeah, it started like making weird sounds. I'll just stay on the phone. Yeah, the Spider-Geddon #5 it was It's written by Crystal's Gage. The artist is Carlo Barberi, and the colorist is David um Cuera, and that's I think, and the inker is Joy Vasquez and Jay Lestian. Um, well, there's a couple of artists. I know George Molina is also another artist in the book.
Yeah, there's like 5 artists on the book. Molina, Barberi, Caselli, and Vasquez are 4. Yeah,
Yeah, that's a lot.
4
Anyway,
4 pencilers, 4 inkers, and 1 colorist to hold it all together.
Jesus, a lot of people worked on this book. Um, yeah, this book was just talking about how with this was Spider-Geddon. It starts off with I think I forgot. I think it was kind of weird start off. You see Miles is he's all of a sudden the Captain Universe Spider-Man with no explanation how he got that thing.
Oh no,
And
that happened last issue. So they were seeking it out, and he actually they they so Solus had destroyed the Enigma Force on another Earth when a Spider-Man had possessed it. Miles went seeking out the one from the 616 universe, and then actually summoned it, and it showed up at the end of last issue.
yeah. So they're fighting the inheritors, and I noticed that Dr. Octopus gives up he gives up Ben Riley, the clone of Ben Riley, the one that was a jackal. He gives him up, and they steal his life force. They kill him off, and Dr. Octopus clones him again. Like he puts the original Ben Riley from the machine. Like he's his own original self again. And I noticed they were fighting the inheritors over and over again, and they were too strong, and they couldn't defeat them, and they were struggling. And the Spider Girls come in. They come from the portal, and they have these armor suits from the scrolls that they use, and all of it. Excuse me. Eventually, you see Spider Gwen and her, and you see Peter Parker and a whole bunch of other Spider characters that they saved from Spider Force. There's and he was able to save those characters that were in that issue, and they all fight the inheritors, and they end up coming up. Dot Octopus wants to kill him, but he ends up coming with a plan with Peter Parker that he ends up puts them in a machine, like some incubator, and they turn into babies. They get mind wiped, and they end up giving their inheritor babies to Spider-Man, and that was the end of the issue.
Yeah. So what did you score the book overall, Stephen?
I give it a 5. I did not like it.
Okay.
Five.
Wow.
Yeah, it was. I just to me it just seems kind of weird. I mean, I didn't like the whole idea of let's turn them to babies and mind wipe them, because they decided to make Spider-Man take care of 6 babies. It's like this kind of a handful.
Well, it was Aunt May from another Earth
Yeah.
that's taking the kids, and I guess she's from an Earth where her, Ben, and Peter are all alive and still live together.
Yeah,
So
I saw that.
So yeah, so the shtick was that the three of them were going to be able to raise the 6 kids or whatever. So that's surprising, I guess. Since I actually this is a series that I would not have normally read. I jumped on it because you were reading it, and I'm not
really enjoying it.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised. It over the course of the 3 issues, or I guess I read the last. I didn't read the whole thing. I guess I read 2 through 5. Over the course. Oh no, maybe I did. Maybe I did read the whole thing. Maybe I caught issue number 1 before I passed it by. But over the course of the 6 issues, because I think I said 1 wasn't that strong, or maybe it was 2. Over the course of the 6 issues or 5 issues or whatever, they pulled together what they needed to pull together. I love Miles Morales, and they highlighted him. You get Miles Morales with the Enigma Force, which I thought was pretty awesome. You get not a lot of Spider-Ham, which was my big concern after reading issue number 2, was my fear that we were going to get a lot of that character, and I don't particularly care for that character. You got to see lots of different variants of the Spider people, and again, even in this issue, they do a ton of fan service, right? Christos Gage, because what they do is when it looks like the heroes, the forces of Otto Octavius and Miles Morales are still, in for a lot of despair, right? Miles becomes Captain Universe, and then like the scary thing, and it almost didn't work. It almost became annoying, right? Like every time there was, if you think of it in terms of what's the movie? Gosh, I can see it in my head now, and I can't think of it. We just watched it a few months ago on the with the It's Another Thing movies crew. I wanted to say Topher Grace, but not Topher Grace. But God, I can't remember. It's anyway. It's a movie that leans very heavily on video game pop culture, and to the point where you see like the character, like you see like the little level up graphics happen to the character as they proceed on through the movie. And so it's kind of like that. And so we get, Miles comes in and he's Captain Universe, and that's like level up. And then the Spider Girls come in, and Annie Mae Parker, turns out that we find out that she's a pattern maker. And so she's able to like pop these, the Spider Girls into this like power armor out of nowhere, level up. And and after each of those, some other Spider character goes, it's not enough. Right. And they do it again, after the Spider Girls. And they say it's not enough. And I'm like,
Inheritors are way too strong for any of them to defeat.
Right. And I'm like, okay, well, at some point this just becomes an Avengers level problem, right? I'm like, so that started to get a little weird. However, but it still gave you those hero moments, right? When somebody comes kind of charging in. But then I was going to say, right, one of the big moments is then you get Ghost Spider, I guess, which is what we're going to start calling Spider-Gwen from now on, popping through the dimensional rift and bringing yet another cavalcade of like 20-something more additional variants of Spider-Man. And you get Spider-Man in the black and white suit. So, you get Spider-Man in the big Voltron armor. First you get Miles Morales with the Captain Universe. Then you get Miles Morales combining the Enigma Force with his Venom Sting, which was super badass. Then you end it with, Miles Morales as Captain Universe pulling out the Voltron sword. And I'm like, wow, it's just kind of this crazy, very comic booky stuff. But I actually liked it in the end. And I felt like it pulled together what they needed to pull together. And it kind of had some neat moments where Spider-Man was like, you see this reconciliation between Spider-Man and Otto Octavius. I think this is a great walk-in. It makes me very excited to read Superior Spider-Man, which actually is one of the important books that actually came out this week. And actually, in a rare instance of almost crackerjack editorial timing, really is perfectly timed in its release, because you walk out of Spider-Geddon, you walk into this week where nothing else of any significance is being released, and then you drop Superior Spider-Man, which is really an excellent time for it to be dropped. So I don't know. So you rated it a 5.0, but I actually liked it. So that's interesting.
Yeah. And I just don't Captain Universe is also struggling with the Inheritors. I didn't get that. I just thought that he was powerful enough to even take them down.
Okay, so talk to me about Extermination #5 because I know nothing about this comic.
Oh, it's from the original. It's about the original X-Men going back to the original timeline. It's the writers at Bryson. Um, the artist is Pepe Larzer. Roz. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And the colorist is Mark Garcia. Um, so yeah, this book is they have you end up finding out that Cyclops isn't dead. I kind of knew that was gonna happen. I knew it was gonna be a cop out because they end up teasing the last issue with Cyclops getting stabbed by Ahava, and people just automatically assume that Cyclops is dead. I didn't fall for it. I knew it was a trick. And you find out it wasn't Cyclops that got stabbed. It was actually Mimic that got stabbed. He just disguised himself as Cyclops. That's what he did. He took and so Mimic ends up getting killed, and they find out Cyclops is still alive, and they decide to fight Ahava, and Ahava is like having these two child mutants that can control people's emotions, and one is an empath and one is a telepath. They can control people's minds at the same, and the other one can control people's emotions. So they were doing that, and the X-Men were losing. All the X-Men were losing, and young Cable decides to we gotta like go back in time and try to talk to the children that were controlled by Ahava, and he like before they were influenced by him. So they end up going back in time, and Jean Grey ends up talking to the two mutant kids, and they were wondering how can you they like asking how can we defeat the villain, and they was like telling them that what's gonna happen in the future, and they talked, and they was able to go back and time, and they was able to go back and this time travel gets real confusing because this is why I hate time travel. So yeah, they go back in time to the original timeline and wipe their memories, and I'm gonna try to remember what happened in this issue, but yeah. So yeah, they end up going back in time to the original timeline, and they end up getting their memories wiped, and yeah, the original X-Men go to the original timeline and get their memories wiped, and apparently everything is everything's reset. The kids are no longer influenced by Ahava, and yeah, they're no longer influenced by him, and the X-Men were able to defeat Ahava, and I noticed that for some reason they were able to get the memories of because they Jean Grey able to made that the memories of the young X-Men activate into the older X or the older version of themselves in a later point of time. So it's not like their memories were completely erased. They were only, I guess, incubated into a certain time period where. So apparently they get all the same memories. So now the older angel has the same memories as the younger angel that was in this present time, and same goes for every other character. So yeah, so now everybody has two sets of now all the original X-Men have two sets of memories. So yeah, this and they also after the fight was over, young Cable ends up going back to some other timeline, and he tells Cyclops that it's time for him to come to the present timeline. He's back alive apparently. And yeah, I think that's the whole point was his whole point was to try to get the X-Men to the original just for Cyclops to be alive, I think. They haven't explained how Cyclops is alive. I just know he's teased by the end of the issue, and that's about it. And they also do a funeral for Mimic and um, there was somebody else that died. Cable. It was Cable and Mimic. So yeah, they end up having a funeral for them, and younger Cable tells Cyclops that it's time for him to go back. So he's already back alive. I gave this issue a 8.0. I really enjoyed it, and it was pretty awesome to see to see the X-Men be able to come with a cohesive plan to to try to defeat the mutants and the Ahaba and his crew. And I did like the interaction where young Jean Grey with the two mutant kids that were influenced by Ahaba. That was pretty interesting how they were able to talk to them and see how to defeat them. And it was pretty interesting to see that each original X-Men before they left, they had each of their moments with their older selves talking about, I guess, that's okay for to leave, that they had their time well spent. Because the thing is, the younger original X-Men thought that they came here for a specific reason to change, to make the world better. And they realize that they can't make the world better, and they feel that their time here was wasted. But the older X-Men, the older versions of themselves made them realize that they didn't waste their time, that they did have a purpose. And I thought that was pretty interesting how they all talk to each other. I did like that. And yeah, and the art was very well done as well. I also did like the art in this book.
Okay, so what was your overall score for this issue?
I gave it an 8.0. I did say the score earlier.
Okay, sorry, I missed it.
Yeah.
Okay, so on to Catwoman number 6, which is a highly unusual pull for me. I just felt like, if I read both this and Batman, when I rehashed my recurring pulls last time, that I would just be getting too much of the post-wedding nonsense. So I have not been following this. First thing is, when I hit that first page, I was like, wow, this art is really good. So that kind of caught me off guard. Then the other part is that it has to be, amazingly well choreographed, because Catwoman is a very complex character in action and in combat. And if you try and kind of get through that very lazily, then it will definitely show. That was not the case in this issue. So this was Laura Allred. Joelle Jones on both story and art. kind of pulling the 1980s John Byrne motif. Laura Allred on colors, and Josh Reed on lettering. Like I said, the first thing that struck me as soon as I hit the first page was that the artwork is pretty beautiful. So the situation in this is that Catwoman has been given an offer by an underground or by a mob boss to work for her and combine forces. Selina is not interested in taking the deal, but this person, in an effort to get Selina to join, has kind of left a trail of bodies, and Selina has that on her conscience and really doesn't want to deal with it. So she's coming to this person's cocktail party to put a stop to them. Along the way, Catwoman gets accosted by this one cop. And then, so my issues with this, there's a couple pages of where the storytelling just gets a little wonky for me. This whole thing culminates with the cops cornering Selina and this lady that she's going after on a balcony. Catwoman tips off the balcony backwards and affects her escape. I'm sorry, not backwards. She actually leaps from the thing and makes good her escape. The cops, in the meantime, make an arrest. Now, there's a flash forward in this right after that that shows as far as I could tell, he's the detective who made the arrest. There's a quick kind of very short romantic interlude between these two characters early in the book, so it looks like it's supposed to be him, but I'm like, I don't understand what this guy did to get captured and wind up in jail, because he wouldn't have been blamed for what happened at the party. So there's a bit of a jump ahead with no kind of connecting tissue in between, and that just kind of made that storytelling kind of sit. Unfortunately, it's a significant chunk of the book right in the last 6 pages, and so that in particular tended to sit with me probably longer than maybe the negative impact should be regarded. But it was just at a crucial point in the story, and I was like, at a point where the story had kind of wrapped up so well, and then they do this flash away, and you're like, I have no idea why this detective is sitting in jail. So overall, so I scored this book at 8.0 out of 10, largely on the strength of its art, and then it wound up, like I said, losing some points for storytelling for me. Steven, did you happen to read this issue by chance?
Yeah, I did read this issue. I thought it was okay. I thought it was just I would give it a 7.5. It was a good issue. It's just I noticed it was just trying to close the chapter of the story, which to me, I wish I had more time with the characters, but it was it was done pretty quickly, and I didn't get enough time to get to actually know the characters throughout the 6 issues.
Well, right, and where I knocked a few points off, a couple half points off for storytelling is I also don't know where they're going from here. They have Catwoman living in this something that's not Gotham, kind of like the same thing, like when a character says they're going to Burnside, so it's close to Gotham, but not exactly the same thing. So I don't know if it's their intention to leave her here and kind of have her do kind of a Batgirl thing, like where she did the year or 2 years in Burnside. It feels like that's where they're headed.
Yeah, and I know she's had to take care of her sister by the end of the issue. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. There's so it's just it just left off with me not being quite clear where they're headed with this. But overall, like I said, I enjoyed the issue and gave it an 8.0 out of 10. Mm-hmm. So Steven, go ahead and talk to us about Old Man Hawkeye to close us out on the review segment.
All right, Old Man Hawkeye is also the final issue of a limited series. It's written by Ethan Sachs, and the artist is Mark Tucchetto. Well, he and also there was another artist, Francisco Mobila. I know there's two artists in the book.
No, and that's good because he was not on the preceding issue, and I'm like, why,
Well, because they have fill-ins. I don't think he was able to draw each issue. Apparently,
no, I think he was off because he's been prepping the run because he's going to Daredevil
oh, I didn't know that. That's
with
interesting.
with
Chip Zdarsky.
Zdarsky. Yeah, so I feel like he had some downtime to go attend to that. But I'm like, if I were going to read Old Man Hawkeye, which I didn't go on with Old Man Hawkeye, but the one of the reasons why I did enjoy it was because of Chiquetto's art.
Oh, well, this book had both arts. Like half of it was Mark Chetto, and the other half was like the other artist because he wasn't able to draw the whole thing. So yeah, and so yeah, the colorist is Andreas Mosa, and that's about it. So yeah, this issue you see Hawkeye fighting. You see both Hawkeyes fighting Avalanche and Bullseye, and they end up defeating them. And the lab was about to blow up because Bullseye wanted to self-destruct the lab that they were in. So, oh, no, it's not Bullseye. It was Avalanche because he caused an earthquake. That's what it was. Yeah, he caused an earthquake for the building to collapse, and the building does end up collapsing, and Hawkeye ends up the Kate Bishop ends up getting separated with Hawkeye, and they end up he ends up fighting Bullseye. Clint Barton ends up fighting Bullseye, and it's a pretty interesting way that he ends up defeating him because Kate Bishop has to guide him somehow because he's like completely blind, and she's giving him directions. He's able to shoot those directions and be able to defeat Bullseye because they already defeated Avalanche in the beginning, and he was pretty easy to kill off. And then they end up fighting Bullseye. So after he kills Bullseye, apparently the doctors Hawkeye decides to take the suitcase with him, like some soldier serum that that the Hydra was using. So he ends up taking it because he's gonna I think he's gonna give it to someone that can actually use it for good use. But after they defeat the Bullseye and get the soldier serum, he also cut off to Taskmaster talking to Red Skull, saying that Baron Zemo had failed his mission. That he got killed off. So what is it? Red Skull said these would be prepared to take Hawkeye down eventually on his own. And by the end of the issue, there's also Kate Bishop decides to leave Clint Barton because he wants to go after Red Skull and to finish the job, and she doesn't agree with him because she's like, this revenge path is way too much for her. She can't handle it. So they end up going their separate ways. And since Hawkeye's gotten completely blind, he decides to go to some place called the Forbidden Path, and he goes to talk to Daredevil, and for some reason Daredevil has the name Stick. I think he took the mantle of Stick, and he's also so he's gonna train Hawkeye, I guess, to fight being blind, and that's how the story ends. I really did enjoy this. I gave it an 8.0. It just seems kind of weird that this is a limited series. They haven't announced that there's gonna be another limited run or anything or ongoing. And for some reason, the writer decides to make a new plot line that leaves it hanging. I don't like when writers set up new plot lines for a series that's already over, and we're not even sure they're gonna have another limited run of continuing the story. Like, what's the point? To me, I'd rather just open and close the chapter. Do not add another story into the closing chapter. So it just seems kind of weird that they end up that Ethan Sachs decides to add another um chapter of the story that isn't going to be continued. I don't like seeing that. So that was my only gripe with the issue, but I enjoyed the fighting scenes. I enjoyed Kate Bishop giving Click directions of where to shoot. I thought it was an interesting idea to take down Bullseye. It was really well done. I enjoyed it.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, that's going to do it for our reviews segment, folks. And again, the books that we are covering are in the show notes for the agenda. Now we're going to move on to talk about the best thing that we read this week. For me, it was Klaus and the Crying Snowman #1 by Boom Comics. Now, I think Boom is also the publisher for another Snowman comic that came out a few years ago that was kind of a favorite of mine, Abigail and the Snowman. Which I really liked because it was one of the first comics that I sat down and read with my oldest daughter, and she really liked it. So The Crying Snowman is a little different. It is not something that I would read to a small child. The Crying Snowman is kind of built around this mythology, and I'm going to try and talk about it as best as I can, because one of the things is that this is a book by Grant Morrison, and there's not a ton of exposition to get you into the story. You don't get a background on what the setup is. You don't get any understanding from any type of a narrator on what the mythology is that is being portrayed. Written by Grant Morrison, illustrated by Dan Mora, lettered by Ed Dukeshire. So, as near as I could tell, what the shtick is that there are several different variants of Santa Claus from different mythologies in regions where people believe in them. So, and these are now Santa Claus who have, in some cases, grown up and are older than maybe a rendition that you may have seen of them. Most notably, for instance, Jack Frost, who most of us have seen in animated form as a younger man, is grown up. And then there's a Saint Nick, and then there's a Klaus. This seems to be the one from Germany. And then there's a discussion that really the Asgardian gods were really another variant sect of this set of kind of winter gods. And then when the Asgardians participated in Ragnarok and attempted to hold the line of good versus evil, and lost. That they were written down in the history books as Asgardians, not as whatever these guys are called. They're not really called anything as not as these Santa Clauses. And so the story opens with the titular character Klaus fighting a tree monster, an animated tree who has somehow been brought to life. But the other character in the story, who's kind of always in the B camera, is the snowman. And that's really what the story is kind of really about. It's really, the story of that character is kind of typical Christmas thing. He is a person who was not a very good person. I think cheated on his wife, wasn't the greatest parent to his kid. And on this night, before he was reanimated as a snowman, he was actually in a car accident and wound up wrapping his car around a tree and died. So he is resurrected as the snowman with like a big wooden arm, which can basically be weaponized. So he has this one big wooden arm and then this little skinny arm. You can kind of think of it like a Hellboy. He's also melting on the planet, and so there's this little meeting in this opening sequence where Klaus fights a big tree monster. This thing is like 6 times the size of a large human. Defeats it and then has a mini council with some of his other Santa Clauses who turned out to help him with the fight. There's a Jack Frost character, and then he is partnered with like a kind of gnomish character who rides a talking goat. So, and apparently the deal is at some point some big bad came through the Night of the Comets, which occurs once every 1,500 years, and the Clauses have defeated them one time, and then the Asgardians lost to them last time, and now the comet, the evil that comes on the comets, is coming around again. And there's all this discussion again, and there's these kind of urban myth pieces or mythology pieces that are thrown about, that the Clauses are apparently capable of intergalactic travel and can go to Mars and Jupiter, and are familiar with like the geographies there. And there are apparently other races that live on there, who the Santa Clauses also take presents to. And so Klaus grabs the snowman to take him with him to Jupiter, because on Jupiter it is colder, and the snowman won't melt. But really, at the end of the story, what it wraps back around to is the whole time this character is melting, and they think that they are going to, now die their second death. But because I guess he kind of repents and feels badly about how he treated his wife and his kid, at the end, he is given a second opportunity, because part of the winning strategy in the story is for them to turn the clock back one day. And so he comes back to Earth. When they come back to Earth, it's actually a day before he died, and he has an opportunity to engage with this kid. You're watching the scene unfold of him melting, and you think that he's going to expire as his kid is running towards him. He has time to hug him one time, but then you think that he's going to melt away, kind of like Frosty the Snowman does near the end of that animated. But it turns out that he's getting a second lease on life, and it actually melts, and he is standing there in his human form. So I thought it was pretty interesting. It's a very large comic. It's like 50 pages. It is well worth the read. I felt like I could have gigged it for, like I said, not giving me a little more exposition. In a regular ongoing. That is the thing that kind of bends me out of shape and makes me cranky. But I found in this story, and again, it's a father, right? It's a father-son story, which I always find stories of parents appealing. So I actually thought it was pretty good. So talk to me about the life of Captain Marvel #5, Stephen, which you selected as your best thing that you read last week.
Yeah, it's the final issue of the miniseries of The Life of Captain Marvel. It's written by Margaret Stoll, and the artist is Margaret Savage, and the colorist is Frederick Billy. So yeah, and Marco Menzia. There's 2 colorists actually, but yeah. This issue is leaving off with there's a woman that was sent to kill Captain Marvel's mother, because during the series you find out that Captain Marvel's mother is also a Kree. She's also a soldier that came to Earth because she had a mission from the Kree to observe Earth and be able to see what Earthlings are like, and I guess it's for Earthling study. Like, she was able to study humans and see if it's worth taking over and do experiments on. And Captain Marvel's mother eventually decides to cut herself off from the Kree because she didn't agree with that. She didn't like it, and she fell in love with Captain Marvel's Carol Danvers' father, and they end up having children, and that's where uh, Captain Marvel ends up being born. She finds out in this mini series that she's half Kree and half human. So so yeah, the person that ends up working for the Kree finds the mother, and they trying to fight her. They both, Carol and her mother, is trying to fight her off. And towards the like in the middle to end of the issue, her mother ends up sacrificing herself. Like she tells Captain Marvel to leave, and she ends up killing the enemy, which yeah was Tanla, I think. Yeah, she ends up killing Tanla, and Captain Marvel mother passes away, and what is it? She actually feels lost, and she ends up saving her brother from all the debris that's in the battle, because he was actually in the middle of the fight, but he was on the sidelines. So she took him, and they decided to talk to each other about what's been going on. She had to like tell him the story of his mother. Um so yeah, there was you see like it cuts back to later on in the future. Tony and Captain Marvel are talking to each other, and he tries to find a way to like make her feel better about herself, about losing her mother at such a weird time, because she just actually got to know who her mother is. Like all this time, she thought her mother was a human, and at the moments of her last time of her life, she finds out she's actually a Kree, and she doesn't feel comfortable about not getting to know her mother for the time being. And Tony made her realize that she actually did know her mother. She just didn't know that she was just not human, but she did know her. She was still being her real self. She just didn't reveal that she was a Kree. That was it. And she understood what Tony said and got over it, and she was able to, I guess, go off to her normal adventures and go back to being an adventurer, I guess. But yeah, I gave this issue a 9.0 because I really did enjoy the nice moments with Captain Marvel and her mother being able to grieve. I did enjoy the interactions with Tony Stark and Carol, because thought I really never liked them breaking their friendship when it came to Civil War too. I hated that because they had such a great relationship with each other and a great friendship. And I was glad to see their friendship come into peace once again. Like they are able to be friends again after this, after the whole Civil War thing that happened. Now they're able to be friends again. And I really did. It was a very touching story. I was pretty happy. I was overwhelmed by it, and it was pretty emotional. It did make me feel sad as well. So I really liked it. It was very well done, and the art was good too.
Okay, very cool. So for my stack this week, it was highly characterized by what to me seemed to be like a lot of really good books that were above average and um, well near the norm of being great issues. And so as a result, I have a ton of stuff in my honorable mentions list, because our honorable mentions list are those comics that we would have graded an 8.0 or above if we were using a 10 point review scale with half point increments. So Catwoman number 6, I already talked through. I gave that an 8.0. Black Badge number 5, the story of secret covert Boy Scouts, I guess, basically, and their Hunger Games type trials that are designed to seek out which of them has the potential to be the best intelligence operative. I gave that an 8.0. Batman number 61, I gave an 8.0. Outcast number 37, I gave an 8.5. As well as Darth Vader number 25. And then Justice League number 14, I gave an 8.0. Spider-Geddon number 5, I gave an 8.5. And Punisher number 5, I gave an 8.5 as well. Steven, what did you have in your list for honorable mentions?
Honorable mentions was I gave Star Wars Darth Vader number 25 a 7.0. I just didn't get to talk to this about this issue, and I did want to talk about it. I just didn't enjoy it as much as the other issues, and I don't know. I don't think for me, I thought Darth Vader was Charles Soule writing Darth Vader was actually weaker than Kieran Gillen's. I didn't enjoy the run as much as Kieran Gillen's. So, and it was just restating what happened in the Return of the Sith. I noticed, like him losing his family and falling to the dark side. So it wasn't really a new story for me for the last issue. I gave Scooby-Doo Team Up number 45 at 8.0, which is a crossover Scooby-Doo and Mr. Miracle. I actually enjoyed it. Champions Annual number 1, I gave it an 8.5. It was a interesting story to learn about Snow Guard and her family. I really did like getting to know about her culture. It was pretty interesting. I gave Avatar: The Last Airbender Imbalance Part 1 at 8.5. It had an interesting story about benders being banned from using their powers in some country. I thought that was interesting. It kind of relates to being anti-gun, I noticed. Yeah, they had some anti-gun stories and anti-immigration, which kind of relates to what's going on in today's world. I read I gave Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 89 9.0. It was an interesting Christmas story with Splinter, like a Christmas Carol type of story with Splinter, finding out the things that he's done and what he can do to make things better. I really liked it. Teen Titans number 25 was Crush's origin. That was also enjoyable. I gave it an 8.0. Justice 14 was the Hulk's story. They go to Dangar and I gave it an 8.0. It was interesting to get to know about that. Part number 5, I gave it an 8.0. They introduced some 2 assassin characters that worked for the porn industry, something like that. And the main character gets to meet them, and there's some interactions. And American Carnage number 2, I gave it a 9.0. It's some cool, interesting story where it talks about how about a cop that ends up killing a black man by accident, and they think that he killed the man out of racism when he only killed him by actual accident, and his lawyers are just trying to put him as a white racist man, and he really isn't, and he's getting into some trouble with his lawyer. And I thought it was interesting politic front on being racist of white people. I thought it was interesting. That's pretty much it.
Very cool. So why don't you hold on to the floor and go ahead and talk us through your polls for next week?
Yeah, I also...
and explain to me what these are, because I think these are a lot of these are back issues that you missed.
No, I put the week after. I put this week and next week's on the poll list. I should have explained that to you. Sorry about that. So yeah, from this week, I'm picking up Fantastic Four number 5, Superior Spider-Man number 1, and X-Force number 1. And then the next week, the one that's coming out after New Year's, I'm picking up Detective Comics 995, The Flash number 61, The Walking Dead, 187, Action Comics 1006, Titans number 32, Batgirl number 30, Batman Beyond number 27, The Terrifics number 11, Justice League Odyssey number 4, Runaways number 17, Mr. and Mrs. X number 7, Raven, Daughter of the Darkness number 11, The Silencer number 12, Man Without Fear number 1, Winter Soldier number 2, Champions number 1, Injustice versus Masters of the Universe number 6, and Wolverine Long Night number 1.
Wow, so that's a long list.
Yeah.
So for me, my pull list only has what's shipping this week. So today, the 26th of December, and I'll be reading Fantastic Four number 5, Superior Spider-Man number 1, Uncanny X-Men number 7, X-Force number 1. And then I'm going to take the time to try and knock out these 2 trades that I've had since August. One of them is a larger format, and those are always kind of tough to get through, particularly when they're very wordy. As this one is, and that is the New Defenders, the Epic Collection. So I'll be trying to get through and finish that with my additional time that I have from not needing to read single issues. And then hopefully I will also be able to pile from that right into the Transformers trade book volume number 3, The Lost Light by IDW. So Steven, anything else that you wanted to mention or go over before we get out of here?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay, well, thanks so much, everybody, for joining in. If you happen to either join by the live stream or if you are watching the archive version of this, we appreciate you either way. Please feel free to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, happy hunting and stay safe out there. Once again, my name has been Agaskally Statements from GearWorks.com and the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube. On behalf of myself, the E2KG, and Mr. Stephen Laura, that's going to do it for us for tonight. We are out of here.